The tequila burned less with each shot. By the fourth one, I couldn't taste it at all. Murphy's Bar in downtown Indianapolis was packed for a Thursday night. Bodies pressed against the worn wood bar, music thumping through speakers that hadn't been updated since the 90s. Perfect. Nobody here knew me. Nobody here cared that I'd just walked out on Brett after another fight about absolutely nothing. My phone buzzed against the sticky bar top. Brett again. 12 missed calls, 23 texts. I turned it face down without reading them. Let him wonder where I was for once. Let him feel what it was like when I didn't come running back after 10 minutes like I usually did. The bartender, a guy about my age with tattoos crawling up both arms, refilled my shot glass without asking. "Rough night?" he asked, not really interested, just making the kind of conversation bartenders make. "Rough life," I said, then laughed because it sounded so dramatic. "Actually, no. Just a rough husband." "Ah." He nodded like he'd heard it 1,000 times. He probably had. "Those are on the house, then." I should have gone home. Should have cooled down, apologized for overreacting like Brett always begged me to do. Instead, I raised the glass in a mock toast to my absent husband and knocked it back. The fight had been about dinner. Such a stupid thing. Brett had texted that he'd be home late from work. Again. Third time this week. I'd already made his favorite lasagna, set the table, even opened a bottle of wine. When he walked in at 9:30, exhausted from another 14-hour day at the firm, I'd lost it. "Must be nice," I'd said, voice dripping with sarcasm I'd perfected over 8 years of marriage. "Coming home whenever you feel like it." "Gina, please, not tonight. I've had a long day." "You've had a long day? I've been here since 5:30 waiting for you. Dinner's ruined." He'd looked at the perfectly good lasagna, still warm on the stove. "It looks fine. I'm sorry I'm late. The Peterson case." "I don't care about the Peterson case," I'd screamed. "I care about us. About having one dinner together this week. We had dinner Sunday." "With your mother?" He'd rubbed his eyes, the gesture that always meant he was trying to stay patient. Brett was always patient, always reasonable. It drove me insane. "What do you want me to do, Gina? Quit my job? Tell the partners I can't work late because my wife made lasagna?" "I want you to care." "I do care. I'm working this hard for us, for our future." "Well, I'm living in the present, and presently I'm done." I'd grabbed my purse, my keys, doing my usual dramatic exit routine. Except this time, instead of driving around the block and coming back, I'd kept going, found Murphy's, started drinking. Now, 3 hours later, I was drunk in a bar I'd never been to, wearing the dress I'd bought last month. The red one Brett hadn't even noticed when I'd modeled it for him. Too busy reading case files on his phone. "Another?" the bartender asked. "Why not?" Someone slid onto the stool next to me. I felt him before I saw him. Expensive cologne cutting through the bar smell of beer and fried food. When I turned, he was exactly what I expected. Good-looking in that obvious way. Dark hair, blue eyes, the kind of jaw that belonged in a men's magazine. Wedding ring tan line on his finger, but no ring. "Buy you a drink?" he asked. "I'm married," I said, holding up my left hand where my wedding set caught the bar lights. The ring Brett had saved for 2 years to buy, working extra shifts all through law school. "So was I," he said, gesturing to his empty finger. "Didn't stop her from leaving. I should have moved. Should have paid my tab and called an Uber. Should have done a lot of things. Instead, I said, 'What are you drinking?' His name was Daniel. Recently divorced, in town for a medical equipment conference, staying at the Marriott down the street. He was from Kansas City, had 2 kids he saw every other weekend, paid alimony that would make my eyes water if I wasn't already seeing double from the tequila. He was also charming. Funny. And he looked at me like I was the only woman in the bar. When was the last time Brett had looked at me like that? When was the last time he'd looked at me at all without that distracted expression, mind already on briefs and billable hours? "You're beautiful," Daniel said after our 3rd drink together. "Your husband must be proud to have you on his arm." He would be if he ever took me anywhere, I said, the bitterness spilling out with the alcohol. Last time we went out was... God, I can't even remember. His firm's Christmas party, maybe? And he spent that talking to partners about cases. Criminal, Daniel said, leaning closer. If you were mine, I'd show you off every night. Easy to say now. Easy to prove. He smiled, that practiced smile of a man who'd done this before. There's a piano bar in my hotel. Much classier than this place. We could get a nightcap, listen to some music. I knew what he was really offering. Knew it from the way his hand had found its way to my knee, the way he kept touching my arm when he laughed at my complaints about Brett. This wasn't about piano bars or nightcaps. This was about two people making bad decisions together. I shouldn't, I said, even as I was already gathering my purse. Probably not, he agreed, throwing cash on the bar. But when's the last time you did something you shouldn't? Never. That was the answer. I was always the good wife. Always understanding when Brett missed dinner, missed dates, missed everything that wasn't billable. Always smiling at firm events. Playing the supportive spouse while partners' wives asked when we were having children, not knowing about the fertility struggles, the treatments Brett was too busy to attend, the negative tests I'd cried over alone. Lead the way, I heard myself say. The walk sobered me up just enough to realize what I was doing, but not enough to stop. Daniel's hand was warm on my lower back as he guided me through the Marriott lobby. The night clerk didn't even look up. The elevator ride was silent except for the ding of passing floors. 7th floor, room 723. His room was generic. Every hotel room in America. Beige walls, burgundy bedspread, landscape painting that could be anywhere or nowhere. He poured whiskey from a bottle on the dresser. I don't usually do this, he said, handing me a glass I didn't want. Me neither. It was true. In 12 years with Brett, 4 dating, 8 married, I'd never even considered it. Never looked twice at another man. Never wondered what it would be like. Even during the loneliest nights, when Brett fell asleep mid-conversation or canceled another date night for work, I'd never thought about stepping outside our marriage. But tonight wasn't about thinking. Tonight was about feeling wanted, about being someone's priority for just a few hours, about pretending I was the kind of woman who got attention, got passion, got more than apologetic kisses and rain checks. Daniel kissed me, and I let him. Kissed him back. Tasted whiskey and mint and nothing familiar. His hands were different from Brett's. Smoother, more insistent. Wrong. Everything about this was wrong, but I pushed that voice down with another sip of whiskey. You're shaking, he said against my neck. I'm fine. We can stop. Just talk. But talking would mean thinking, and thinking would mean admitting what I was about to do. So instead I kissed him harder, pulled him toward the bed with its 2 crisp sheets and too many pillows. What happened next happened fast. Clothes on the floor, skin on skin, a stranger's hands on my body. It wasn't good, wasn't bad. It just was. Mechanical. Empty. Nothing like the movies where affairs are passionate and overwhelming. This was just 2 drunk people in a hotel room making a mistake. Even then, I kept thinking about Brett. About our first time in his tiny law school apartment. How he'd been so careful, so gentle. How he'd held me after and talked about our future. The house we'd buy, the kids we'd have, the life we'd build. He'd kept every promise except the one about having time for it all. Daniel passed out almost immediately, snoring softly into the pillow. I lay there staring at the ceiling while the room spun gently. My phone, forgotten in my purse, buzzed and buzzed. The bedside clock said 2:47 a.m. Brett would be beyond worried now. Probably driving around looking for me, calling hospitals. What had I done? What had I actually done? I slipped out of bed, gathered my clothes in the dark. My underwear was torn. When had that happened? I shoved it in my purse, pulled my dress on without it. My hair was a mess, my makeup smeared. I looked exactly like what I was, a cheater sneaking out of a hotel room in the middle of the night. Daniel stirred when I opened the door but didn't wake. I didn't leave a note. What would I say? Thanks for helping me destroy my marriage over a missed dinner? The Uber driver didn't try to make conversation. Probably used to picking up people from hotels at 3 a.m, reeking of alcohol and sex and regret. I watched the city pass by, each mile taking me closer to home and the reality of what I'd done. The panic started setting in as we turned onto my street. Brett's car in the driveway, house lights blazing. He was awake, waiting. What was I going to say? How could I explain this? I found him in the living room, still in his work clothes, pacing. When he saw me, the relief on his face was like a punch to the gut. "Thank God," he said, rushing to me. "I've been calling everyone, the hospitals, the police, I thought—" He stopped, really looking at me for the first time, at my smeared makeup, my wrinkled dress, the way I couldn't meet his eyes. "Gina?" "I'm sorry," I said, the words barely a whisper. "Where were you?" I could lie, make up a story about staying with a friend, about my phone dying, about losing track of time. He'd believe me. Brett always believed me, trusted me completely. "Gina, you're scaring me. What happened? Are you hurt?" He reached for me, and I flinched away. That's when he knew. I saw it in his eyes. The moment understanding dawned. "No," he said, stepping back. "No, you didn't. Brett dash. Tell me you didn't." His voice broke. "Tell me you just got drunk with your friends. Tell me you slept in your car. Tell me anything except—" "I'm sorry," I said again, because what else was there to say? He sank onto the couch like his strings had been cut. "Who?" "Does it matter?" "Who?" Louder this time. "Nobody." "A stranger. Someone from a bar." "A stranger." He laughed, but it sounded like crying. "You threw away our marriage for a stranger." "I didn't mean for it to happen." "What did you think would happen?" "You storm out, go to a bar, leave with some random man?" "What did you think would happen, Gina?" He was right. Of course he was right. Brett was always right, always logical, always seeing 3 steps ahead while I acted on impulse and emotion. "I was angry," I said weakly. "About dinner?" "You did this because I was late for dinner?" "It's not just dinner. It's every dinner, every date night, every time you choose work over me." "So you chose another man over us?" He stood up, anger finally breaking through the shock. 8 years, Gina. 8 years of marriage, and you throw it away because I work too much? You don't understand. You're right, I don't understand. I don't understand how you could do this, how you could. He stopped, running his hands through his hair. Did you use protection? The question hit like cold water. Protection. I tried to remember, but the whole thing was a blur of bad decisions and tequila. I don't know. You don't know? His voice went up an octave. You don't know if you used protection with some random stranger you met in a bar? I was drunk. That's not an excuse. I know. I know it's not an excuse. I know I messed up. I know I ruined everything. I was crying now, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, he said quietly. Sorry doesn't undo it. We stood there in our living room, surrounded by the life we'd built. The pictures from our wedding, our vacation to Hawaii last year, the throw pillows I'd picked out just last month. All of it meaningless now, all of it tainted by what I'd done. I'll go to counseling, I said desperately. We can work through this. People work through this. People work through affairs. Emotional connections that went too far. Not this. Not my wife coming home at 3 a.m, smelling like another man because I worked late. Brett, please. I need you to leave, he said, not looking at me. I can't look at you right now. This is my house too. Then I'll leave. He grabbed his keys. But one of us needs to go, and I don't trust myself right now. Where will you go? Does it matter? Did you think about where I was while you were... He couldn't finish the sentence. I'll be at my brother's. We'll figure out next steps later. Brett, wait. Let's talk about this. Now you want to talk? Now after you've already made your choice? He paused at the door. I asked for so little, Gina. Just patience while I built my career. Just understanding that the long hours were for us, for our future, and you couldn't even give me that. That's not fair. Fair? He whirled around. You want to talk about fair? Fair would have been talking to me about your feelings. Fair would have been counseling. Fair would have been literally anything other than what you did tonight. He left, and I heard his car tear out of the driveway. I stood in our empty house, still in my wrinkled dress, still smelling like Daniel's cologne, and wondered how I'd gotten here. How a fight about lasagna had led to the end of my marriage. I called in sick the next day, and the day after, sat in our house like a ghost, waiting for Brett to come home. He didn't. His brother came by to pack a bag for him and could barely look at me. He's filing for divorce, Jake said, shoving Brett's suits into a garment bag. He wanted me to tell you. He won't even talk to me? Would you? If he'd done what you did? I didn't have an answer for that. The divorce was swift and brutal. Brett's lawyer was one of his colleagues, sharp as a razor. My infidelity meant I got the minimum. No alimony. I had to buy out my share of the house or sell. Division of assets that left me with enough to start over, but not much else. Our friends chose sides, and it wasn't mine. The story spread like wildfire through our social circle. Brett's version was simple and damning. I'd cheated with a stranger because he worked late. Nobody asked for my side. Nobody cared that I'd been lonely for years, that I'd begged for attention, for time, for anything beyond the scraps of his schedule. Not that it mattered, not that it excused what I'd done. I moved to Milwaukee. Fresh start in a city where nobody knew me as the woman who destroyed her marriage over missed dinners. Got a job at a marketing firm, a small apartment overlooking the lake. Started therapy, trying to understand why I'd blown up my life so spectacularly. You wanted to be caught, my therapist suggested during one session. The staying out all night, coming home disheveled. Part of you wanted him to know immediately. Why would I want that? Because then he'd have to pay attention. Then you'd be impossible to ignore. She was probably right. Brett had ignored me for years, not maliciously but completely. And I'd done the one thing guaranteed to make him see me, even if it meant losing him in the process. I ran into his partner's wife at a conference 2 years later. She was polite but cold, filling me in on his life in that way that was meant to hurt. He was engaged to a paralegal from his firm, planning a fall wedding, already talking about kids. She's very understanding about his hours, she said pointedly, very supportive of his career. Good for her, I managed. He seems happy, happier than he ever was. She trailed off, but I knew how that sentence ended. Happier than he ever was with me. The thing is, she was probably right. Brett needed someone who could handle being second to his career. Someone who found fulfillment in supporting his ambitions rather than competing for his attention. I'd never been that person, even before that night at Murphy's. But that didn't excuse what I'd done. Nothing excused that. My mother called me a month after I'd moved to Milwaukee. I'd been avoiding her calls, knowing what was coming. How could you? She said without preamble. That boy loved you, gave you everything. Mom, don't mom me. I raised you better than this. Your father and I, we had our problems, but we worked through them. We didn't go running to strangers in hotel rooms. It was a mistake. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake is saying something hurtful in anger. This was a choice. A series of choices. Each one worse than the last. She was right. Every step had been a choice. Choosing to stay at the bar instead of going home. choosing to talk to Daniel, choosing to leave with him, choosing to go to his room, choosing to let him kiss me, choosing not to stop. Brett called me, she continued, wanted to make sure I knew you were okay. Even after what you did, he was worried about you. That's the kind of man you threw away. I know what kind of man he is. Do you? Because the Gina I raised would never have... She stopped, took a breath. I'm ashamed of you. Your father would be ashamed too if he were still alive. The words hit like physical blows. My father had died 3 years earlier. Brett had been there for everything. The hospital visits, the funeral arrangements, holding me while I sobbed. He'd taken a week off work, the first time I'd ever seen him do that. I'm ashamed of myself too, I whispered. Good. Maybe that shame will keep you from doing this to the next man foolish enough to trust you. She hung up. We didn't speak again for 6 months. Daniel tried to contact me once, found me on LinkedIn of all places. A brief message. Hey, hope you're doing well? If you're ever in Kansas City. I stared at it for a long time before responding. Not to reconnect, but because I needed him to know what his part in my destruction had cost. That night destroyed my marriage. My husband filed for divorce. I lost my home, my friends, everything. I hope it was worth it for you because it cost me everything. His response came quickly. Whoa, that's heavy. You can't blame me for your choices. You're the one who came to my room. I didn't force you. He was right, of course. I'd walked into that hotel room on my own 2 feet, made every bad decision all by myself. I deleted the conversation, blocked him. He was just one night that cost me everything. The STD testing was another humiliation, sitting in the clinic explaining to the doctor why I needed a full panel. The 2 weeks waiting for results, terrified I'd given Brett something, added another layer of violation to what I'd done. Everything came back negative, but the relief was hollow. I'd risked not just my marriage, but his health for a stranger whose last name I never knew. 5 years after that night at Murphy's, I ran into Brett at O'Hare Airport, both of us caught in the same storm delay, waiting for flights to different places. He saw me first, did a double take like he wasn't sure it was real. Gina? Hi, Brett. He looked good. Successful, the kind of polished that came from having someone at home who made sure his ties matched and his shirts were pressed. The wedding ring on his finger was platinum, not the gold band I'd placed there once upon a time. We ended up at the same bar, not by choice, but because it was the only one with open seats. He ordered whiskey. I stuck to water. Congratulations, I said, nodding to his ring. On the marriage. Thanks. 2 years now. You? No, not married. Dating? Here and there. Nothing serious. He nodded, took a sip. I heard you moved to Milwaukee. Yeah, got a job at Northwestern Mutual, financial planning. That's good. You were always good with numbers. We fell silent. Around us, the airport hummed with frustrated travelers, announcements about delays, life moving forward despite obstacles. I'm sorry, I said suddenly. I know it doesn't matter now, but I need you to know how sorry I am. He studied his drink for a long moment. I know you are. I ruined everything. Over nothing. Over stupid, petty. It wasn't nothing to you, he said quietly. I see that now. You were drowning and I didn't notice, or didn't want to notice. That doesn't excuse what I did. No, he agreed. It doesn't. But I wasn't a perfect husband either. I took you for granted, assumed you'd always be there, waiting, no matter how many dinners I missed or dates I canceled. I should have been. That's what marriage is, for better or worse. Marriage is also 2 people choosing each other every day, and I stopped choosing you. I chose work every time. So did I in the end. Just differently. He almost smiled. Yeah, you definitely chose different. How's your wife? With the hours? Sarah? She's good. She gets it. Came from nothing, like me, understands the drive. Plus, she works at the firm, so. He shrugged. It's easier when you're both in it together. That's good. I'm glad you found someone who fits. We didn't fit, did we? He said after a moment. Even before, we wanted different things, needed different things. Maybe. Or maybe I just didn't try hard enough. Gina. He turned to look at me fully. You made a terrible choice. One I'll never understand, but you didn't make it in a vacuum. We both failed that marriage, just in different ways. His flight was called then. He finished his drink, gathered his bag, paused before leaving. Be happy, he said. Whatever that looks like for you, be happy. Brett, I called after him. He turned. Your mom, she was right about me, wasn't she, when she said I wasn't good enough for you? His mother never liked me. Said I was too loud, too emotional, too demanding. She'd warned Brett at our engagement party that I'd need more attention than he could give. I'd hated her for it then. Now I wondered if she'd just seen what everyone else missed. My mother says a lot of things, he replied carefully. Doesn't mean all of them are right. But that one was. He looked at me for a long moment. You were good enough, Gina. You just made a bad enough choice that it didn't matter anymore. Then he was gone, disappearing into the boarding line, back to his life, his wife, his future. Everything that should have been mine if I'd been a different person. A better person. A person who didn't destroy everything she touched. I sat there after he left, watching planes take off into the stormy sky. 5 years, and he'd forgiven me more than I'd forgiven myself. Found a way to see the bigger picture while I was still stuck on that one night. That one horrible choice that changed everything. But maybe that's the real consequence. Not the divorce or the financial loss or the social exile. The real consequence is carrying the weight of knowing you had something good, imperfect but good, and you destroyed it. That you became the villain in your own story and can't rewrite the ending. I eventually made my flight to Seattle, a conference for work, 3 days of presentations and networking, and pretending to be someone who hadn't imploded her life in a hotel room she barely remembered. I was good at it now, the pretending. Had built a whole new identity around it. Successful, independent, put together. But sometimes, usually late at night in another generic hotel room, I let myself remember. Not Daniel. He was irrelevant, a bit player in my self-destruction. But Brett, the weight of his absence, the life we could have had if I'd been patient, if I'd been faithful, if I'd been anything other than what I was that night at Murphy's. They say time heals all wounds. They're wrong. Time just teaches you to carry them better, to smile at conferences and date appropriately, and build something resembling a life on the ashes of what you burned down. And that's what I do, day after day, year after year, carrying the weight of room 723 and the choices I made there. Knowing that somewhere in Chicago, Brett's living the life we planned with someone who deserves it. Someone who didn't throw it all away for a stranger's touch and a moment of feeling wanted. That's my penance. Not the lost money or friends or status, but knowing, absolutely knowing, that I had real love, and I destroyed it. And that's a life sentence I gave myself, all in the span of one drunken night.